Hey guys, welcome back. So now we are getting back into Spider-Man Spider Shadow, which is a mini-series from Marvel's What If, and it's quickly become one of my favorites, because we've seen a darker Peter Parker a number of times, but this one just hits different. So let's not waste any time and just hop back in. So first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping back in, like just after Peter had killed the Hobgoblin, it's here where we see his symbiosis evolve both physically and mentally. And for the physical side, we see it as a more menacing look, but for the mental side, which started off looking like nightmares, but at this point they just turned into conversations between Peter and the symbiote. Because on both ends, the more harmonious they get, the less turbulence we see in the representation of the symbiosis. But it's here while he's having a conversation with the symbiote to where Peter brings up that the old saying from Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility, to where Peter thinks he's been seeing it wrong this whole time. And with talking to the symbiote, Peter believes that he has power and he believes that he has a responsibility to save people and to keep them safe, but with the way that he's been doing things before, he hasn't been keeping them safe. And with the whole cycle of sending supervillains to prison so they can go there for vacation and then just plan their next plot, but then when they get out, like those plans only lead to people getting killed, whether it's Gwen Stacy and her father, which we went into more depth about with symbiote Spider-Man, but Peter sees this all as the same, whether it was Gwen, her father, Aunt May, or even his Uncle Ben when he let that robber get away. But like we had seen before, Peter believes that it's his responsibility to stop these villains before they're allowed to continue to kill more people. And it's here where the symbiote then brings it all back, telling Peter that it was his responsibility, but now it's our responsibility. And it's crazy because it's not just the process of symbiosis, but it's like this whole process of justification really. Because the symbiote is leading Peter to believe that things live, things die, like this is a part of nature. And the symbiote just adds on to the justification, telling Peter that these villains have essentially forfeit their right to life. Like it's nuts. Cold world, symbiote. But even with Peter feeling this way and leaning into this dark mindset, like he doesn't want Mary Jane to find out and he doesn't want people to think that he's a murderer. But then he walks past a newsstand and he's on the front page of the paper from the Daily Bugle that showed that he was spotted murdering Roger Kingsley. And you can tell right away that that's not going to sit well. But after this, we then jump over to Wilson Fisk, who's reading the paper, which reads that an eyewitness saw Spider-Man fighting the Hobgoblin, and with doing this, at one point Spider-Man just snapped. Like those were the words of the eyewitness. But with seeing this Wilson Fisk, he realizes that this is a problem, because his criminal organization, it can handle a 5% loss because of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. But with this new Spider-Man straight ending criminals, Fisk now realizes that Spider-Man is eventually going to come for him. And because of that, he tells James Wesley to make some calls, because from his perspective, this new Spider-Man's gotta go. But after this, we then go over to the Daily Bugle, where Jameson is pretty much shouting from the rooftops that he's been right this whole time. And at this point, he's just telling Robbie, who used to be one of the Daily Bugle's lead journalists, and I'm not sure if that's the case at this point, but Jameson is just telling him how he missed it, and Jameson trusts his own gut. And he had known this because he had a gut feeling about it. But as Jonah gets to type his next headline, which is Spider Manslaughter. But as soon as he sits down, he looks up and Spider-Man just jumps through the window. And when he gets there, Jonah's like, Robbie, call the police, we just had a murderer break in. And at this point, Spider-Man just like, do it, I don't care. And he pins Jonah to the wall and then crushes his left hand. And he lets Jonah know, like, this is exactly what you wanted, isn't it? And he tells him, like, even prior to now, all Spider-Man has done is clean up the city and help people. But when he's talking to Jonah and destroying that man's hand, Robbie tries to make his way to the door, but Spider-Man just webs the mess out of that guy. But then he yanks Jonah off of the wall by his broken hand, just insult to injury. And he lets Jonah know, like, we both got what we want, with Spider-Man being the criminal that Jonah always said that he was, but with doing it, he's figured out a way to help more people. But before he leaves, he tells Jonah, like, if he sees one more article about Spider-Man from the Daily Bugle, he's gonna come back and break the other hand. But after this, we then go back to the Fantastic Four, to where Ben and Reed, they're looking at the results that Reed ran on Spider-Man while Johnny's flying around trying to find him. But with looking at these results from the test, Reed says that it's only a matter of time before the symbiote permanently bonds with Spider-Man. And because of that, the Fantastic Four, they now have a clock counting down to where they need to find him. But at this point, Johnny has flown over every spot that he could think of, but there is no sign of Spider-Man anywhere. And it really has them nervous because the clock is ticking and Spider-Man is quickly reaching the point of no return. But after this, we then go over to Peter's apartment to where MJ's let herself in once again. But she's come here to check on him because she hasn't seen him since Aunt May's funeral. He's not answering his phone, plus she's seen the headline of the Daily Bugle. But when she gets there and she makes her way to Peter's bedroom, and I gotta tell you, like, just the way that Pasquale Ferry just has his, it just looks brilliant. Because with Peter sleeping in midair with the symbiote just latched onto the walls, and the symbiote's also supporting his back, so there's that. But it also just has this horror element, like MJ had just walked in on Dracula sleeping. And when she wakes him up, he tells her, like, look, I know it looks weird, but you gotta believe me, like, it is extremely comfortable. But as we know, that's not the reason that she came here, because right away she asks Peter about what she'd seen in the paper, and she wants to know from him directly, like, is it true? And when she asks him, Peter, he doesn't say anything immediately, but then he goes on to explain to MJ that because of who he is and what he's capable of doing, he has to make a decision whether to let someone like the Hobgoblin live at the cost of an Aunt May. And he tells her it's not a decision that everybody can handle, and he lets her know because of his power, he's one of the people who have to make that decision. And from there, he just takes off, telling her that he's finally going to make that call. But also with him taking off, like, he can't stand the fact that MJ knows about all this. So once again, there's a bit of logic and a bit of conscience still eating away at him. But not long after he leaves, his spider sense goes off and he's attacked. And from here, man, it's go time. Because when his spider sense goes off and he barely dodges this blast, he then looks to see where it came from, and it's the Shocker. And man, I gotta tell you, like, as soon as I seen it, it was the Shocker. Like, every Shocker in every reality needs to avoid a symbiote Spider-Man at all costs. But with the Shocker coming after Peter, like, he knows that this guy, he just wouldn't do it alone. And his hero Scorpion then tries to blitz him, and then Peter's like, okay, this makes more sense. Scorpion's a little bit more dangerous. But essentially what these guys are doing here, they're calling his bluff. And they were definitely sent here by Wilson Fisk, but even still with that being the case and them seeing the headlines in the paper, they've been toe-to-toe with Spider-Man before, and with them just seeing him wearing black now, like, they're not buying it. But when Scorpion expresses this, like, you expect us to believe you gone bad? Like, you think, and Peter just ends this guy. And from there, he just walks over to Shocker, who is shocked. And he's over there just slumped like a horror movie, like, this can't be life. But when this happens, it's quickly that Shocker realizes that Wilson Fisk was right, and that everything he had heard about Spider-Man turning into your friendly neighborhood murderer, like, it was the truth. But when he tries to go for like a surprise blast on Peter, Peter just dodges it very nonchalant, allowing it to hit the building behind him. And once again, to point out some of the non-Peter-like attributes of this, like, he doesn't even try to help the mother and their kid. And as it turns out, like, the mother and their child, they're okay. Like, the mom gets scuffed up a bit, but in any other scenario, Peter would have helped them out, either catching the debris of some webs or just pulling them out of the way. But that's just not the case here, because Peter, he pays it no mind and he goes over to Shocker, to whom the last thing we heard him say was Fisk was right, which then takes us over to Wilson Fisk, who's lounging in his condo reading the biggest book I've ever seen, because he big already. Like, this guy went to Barnes & Noble's talking about, let me get that in the large. But it's not long after we see him here that Peter shows up, and Peter is dropping off limbs left and right. But with Peter finding Fisk here, like, Wilson Fisk was waiting for him, but he didn't expect him to be back like this quick. But when he gets there, Fisk tells him like he had did some research, because when he saw that Spider-Man had murdered the Hobgoblin, he had also noticed the woman that died in that fire was May Parker. So Fisk then figured, like, for her death to get such a reaction out of Spider-Man, they had to be close. So from there, the closest match to someone who lined up with Spider-Man's stature was Peter Parker. And after that, Fisk then looked to see if he had any other close family members so he could threaten, but he didn't find anyone, not a wife, not a girlfriend, no one. And so when Fisk starts to tell him how sad that is, Peter then sends his mouth through the back of his head, adding another body to the list. And I can't say that I wanted to see Wilson Fisk catch a brutality, but I will say that I've grown tired of seeing this big human being with no powers go toe-to-toe with Spider-Man. Like, stop it. That's cap. And even prior to this, like, an argument could be made that Peter has always been pulling his punches, and that's why Fisk has gotten the upper hand before. But I will counter that with the argument of, if you are an enhanced being who can catch a vehicle vehicle and sit it back down, then you would also be physically capable of one-punching any human. And miss me with all that physical peak human stuff, cause you're still human. But after this, we then go over to the Sinister Six, and they've taken notice that Spider-Man has killed Hobgoblin, Scorpion, the Shocker, and now Wilson Fisk. And prior to now, like Wilson Fisk, he did give these guys the invitation or solicitation to take down Spider-Man and get paid, but Kraven told these guys to hold back because if they rushed in there like Shocker and Scorpion, then they would have got bodied too. And at this point, Mysterio's saying that they still need to lay low, but Kraven is like, no, we gotta band together and we gotta strike at once. But what I think is interesting here is that this is the beginning of the new Sinister Six, or at least that's what Otto calls them, and it's here where we get the big reveal of who the sixth member is when Otto Octavius tells them that only one of us has seen this new Spider-Man up close. And then right after that, we get this reveal that the sixth member of this group, of the new Sinister Six in this story, and it's J. Jonah Jameson. And right off the bat, Jameson, he admits that he doesn't like working with these guys. And sure, he believes that each and every one of them should be locked up behind bars, but Spider-Man is way more dangerous than any of these guys. And for this Jameson, who has been right about Spider-Man, like he's willing to do what he needs to do to stop this guy. But after this, Doc Ock, he gives Kraven the go to get things started as far as drafting up a plan, because the hunt is his expertise. So he tells Kraven to make a plan and get back to himself and the others, because at this point with his own resources, Otto has no eyes on Spider-Man. But then it's here one of his men standing behind him by the screen, like he suggests that they do something to lure Spider-Man out. But Otto just brushes this guy off. He tells him like, I don't pay you to think, and he gives these guys the orders to go arm the other men, because after the new Sinister Six is done with Spider-Man, he wants to be ready to take care of the other villains because he doesn't trust them. But then when the same guy doesn't go with the others to arm the men and get them ready, Otto doesn't even look at him, but he asks him like, did I make myself clear? And then the dude just stabs Otto in the back, because this whole time it was Eddie Brock. And this was a twist that I did not expect. But when he does this, he lets Otto know that he's not gonna let him kill Spider-Man, because that's his job. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below or in Discord, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.